Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you haven't been here before, and welcome back if you have. I'm EDJ, and I think we have finally arrived to arguably what's going to be my favorite video from this series, Napoleon's Endgame, France, 1814. And I say that because it's going to cover my favorite Napoleon campaign, which is the 6 Days campaign. I believe that's what it's called, where he went on the defense for Paris and just continued decimating, he continued winning these battles against the coalitionists they're getting, and he's just going back. He's completely outnumbered. His empire's gone, and his army's a shadow of what it once was, and it's just even with all of that, Napoleon is still a genius. You might have wondered a bit with the blunders with Russia and Spain and other losses, if the Napoleon of old is gone, as if he's lost his touch, as if his mind, his military brilliance has diminished, and then he comes out with this, and it's no, he still got it. He still has it, until the end. I think even to Waterloo, he still had it. There were other factors and mistakes made at Waterloo, but I really think Napoleon still, he never lost his touch, I think. He is maybe not the master of Europe, but he is the master of war, as, Epic History TV so brilliantly put it last video, and we're about to witness it. So I'm just looking forward to this. I want to watch Napoleon's last blazing... This is really it, huh? This is his last, his last showcase of brilliance, his last hoorah, if you will, his last... Yeah, this is it, because he doesn't win battles. After this, he goes into exile, he returns, and then loses and gets exiled again. Yeah, this is it, guys. We are here to witness Napoleon, for the last time, stack up W's, and yeah, it just feels like the last grasp of air for a dying empire, Here I am getting all poetic with it. Either way, I just want to witness it, and it'll be sad, because next is Waterloo, and we're done after that. I'm gonna jump to the Marshals, but yeah, we're done after Waterloo, guys. And it's gonna be... Let's just enjoy, for the last time, Napoleon win. If you want to watch this video without my face, without me pausing to talk or whatever, the link will be down in the description down below. Without any further ado, let's see Napoleon's Endgame, France 1814. Peace, peace. It's easy enough to say the word. Am I going to give up all that I possess in Germany? Napoleon, you lost all that you possess in Germany after Leipzig. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know that's mean, but... Yeah, after Leipzig, you don't really have an empire anymore. It's just France.
In October 1813, Napoleon had suffered his heaviest ever defeat at Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations. Surviving French forces, exhausted, sick and demoralized, retreated to the River Rhine and prepared to defend France from invasion. But in November, the armies of the Sixth Coalition paused their advance, and Austrian Foreign Minister Metternich offered peace terms.
Metternich is back.
The Frankfurt proposals would allow Napoleon to keep his throne if France returned to her so-called natural frontiers.
Okay, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while with you guys. So, I almost brought it up a video or two ago, but I mentioned, in my opinion, I know this might, not all of you might agree, but just hear my side of it. I think Napoleon only had 2 chances after the Russian invasion to remain Emperor of France. The first, win Leipzig. We know that didn't happen. The second is this, the Frankfurt proposals. Basically to have, France returned to its natural borders. I believe he kept something of the Rhine, but either way, for the most part, returned to natural borders, and Napoleon rejects these. He rejected the first ones, and then I think later on tried to accept them, but there were even harsher terms, so he once again rejected. But yeah, I really think this was the last chance. After losing Leipzig, I think this was the last chance, realistically, Napoleon had at remaining emperor and keeping his throne. I know a lot of people are of the opinion that if he had won Waterloo, he could have forced a peace and then Napoleon would have been emperor again. I don't think so, guys. I really think by the time of Waterloo, Europe was not willing to negotiate with him, and that even if he had won that battle, there were more coalition armies coming, and I think Napoleon would have lost. I don't know how popular of an opinion that is. I don't know. I think I might be in the minority, but that's what I think. So with that said, the Frankfurt proposals, the last chance Napoleon had after Leipzig, in my opinion, should have accepted them. Honestly, that's the best deal you're getting. Like, you get to at least have France. They're not taking they're taking territory from your extended empire, but France is relatively alone. And yeah, I know Napoleon. He's prideful. He didn't want to do it. He thought he could win, or he felt that he was. I remember I was watching the Napoleon series, and like something he said is, give up all of my territory that I've spent, that so many people have sacrificed, for me to get. And I get that mindset, but Napoleon, I'm sorry, you should have accepted these. And I also heard that apparently not every of the coalition, at least like Britain, wasn't completely involved with the Frankfurt proposals, but I think, just hear me out, in an alternate reality, Napoleon decides to accept these, decides to have France returned to its natural borders, probably suffers a little bit more loss, beyond humiliating, but at least he gets to remain Emperor of France, and he could at least spend many more years building up his power. He could spend years building up his power, maybe reevaluating where it all went wrong, and maybe, just biding his time. He could have used this, even if he didn't want to fully give up, maybe he could have used it as an opportunity to, rebuild himself, maybe try something new, I don't know, bide time if you would, raise an heir, and maybe if, I don't know, I just think, I know it's not Napoleon at all, but I seriously am of the opinion that these proposals were the best deal he was gonna get, and that he should have accepted them. At least, because we know what happened in real life, right? He doesn't accept them, he gets kicked off, and he spends the later half of his life depressed on Elba and Helena, remembering his past glories and just dying there. I think even he might look back and be like, man, maybe I should have accepted those proposals. Maybe I should have said yes. I'm pretty sure it sucks either way, guys. Either way, this sucks for Napoleon. But at least it sucks a little less because he gets to be in charge of France still. And probably has the chance to rebuild his strength and maybe at least raise his heir and all that. I know there's a lot more factors to it. Maybe they would have declared another war on him. Maybe they would have changed their mind. I know there's a lot, but I still think he should have accepted this proposal, because he would still at least have a throne. Real life, he gets kicked to the islands. He has no throne. That's it. He's lost everything. At least here, he keeps something. I don't know. That's my opinion. I don't know if they're popular or not. I don't know. I probably might be my hottest take so far in this series, but I'm gonna stick with my guns on this one. I really think these proposals were the best he's getting.
It was the best offer Napoleon was likely to get.
I agree!
Now that his back was to the wall, and all Europe's great powers were united against him. Even so, he did not accept the terms. He merely agreed to reopen negotiations. To the Allies, and many in France itself, it proved that Napoleon would not listen to reason. The war went on.
Yeah, Napoleon, maybe you should have learned a bit more from all the people you beaten and maybe just accepted it. Because, yeah, now they saw him as unreasonable. And I'm starting to wonder if because they saw him as unreasonable and unable to accept defeat, even when they probably think in their minds they're offering him a pretty good deal. Hey, you get to at least still be in charge of France, you know? I'm imagining in their minds they're offering Napoleon a somewhat sweet deal, right? And Napoleon flat out refuses. I think that might be the reason they were unwilling to negotiate with him when he comes back from when he comes back from exile and leading up to Waterloo. I really think maybe if Napoleon had shown a little bit more willingness to accept that, read the room, see that he's lost, maybe, I mean, granted, I still think he probably thought he had a chance, but like, you know, maybe they might have been like, you know, he accepted defeat, like we accepted defeat from him all these years. Maybe he can be reasoned with. Maybe that might have swayed their minds a bit. Again, I'm just speculating. I don't really know, but yeah, maybe that came back to bite him because now they see him as unreasonable.
And by January 1814, Napoleon's situation looked even worse. Many of his besieged garrisons in the east were starved into surrender. Marshal Davout, with 34,000 men in Hamburg, was now besieged.
Oh, not Davout, not the MVP, man. Davout's gone. So many of the good marshals, like Lannes, and just gone, like, man.
Denmark, one of France's last allies, was invaded by Bernadotte's Swedish army and made to join the coalition. French troops evacuated the Netherlands, which reasserted its independence after nearly 20 years of French control. In Italy, Eugene's army faced a new enemy, Joachim Murat, King of Naples, now marching north with 30,000 men to honor his new alliance with the Sixth Coalition.
Which is funny, because I don't think they accept him after. Yeah, so... yeah, like I said, with Bernadotte, I know I've joked a lot about this series. Oh, boo, Bernadotte, my least favorite, but... you know, like, I understand Bernadotte. At least, like, with Bernadotte, after he and Napoleon parted ways, Napoleon said, hey, don't declare war on me. And Bernadotte, I think, said, I'm gonna do what's in the best interest of my people. I respect that a lot about Bernadotte. Like, at least you knew where you stood with the dude, you know? And I know we joke, oh, traitor, but, like, he didn't owe anything to Napoleon. I think even Napoleon understood that. With Murat, from what I'm getting, is he was trying to constantly play both sides, as we saw. He's like, hey, accept me. They said no. Then he fights with Napoleon in Leipzig, and now he's trying his hardest to, you know, get in bed with the coalition. Like I said, I think Murat feels more of a traitor than Bernadotte, in my opinion. And like I said, my opinion on Murat has soured. In terms of ranking the marshals, in terms of, like, feats and accomplishments, Murat still ranks very highly, but in terms of just me liking them, which is, you know, a more personal list just to myself, Murat's pretty low. Like, I've soured on him, guys. I'm not gonna lie. You know, my feelings are not probably gonna change, because, I don't know, he just reminds me of people I used to know who would, like, try to play both sides, you know, kind of act like your friend and then trying to backstab you. I don't know. Like I said, maybe that's why I've soured on Murat. He reminds me of certain people I used to know. But yeah. Yeah, overall, it does come back to bite him, though. It really does. You know, he gets... yeah, I believe the coalition doesn't accept him. He loses his throne, and I believe eventually he's executed. Like, yeah, Murat, it's not a happy end for him, you know? But yeah, I guess it's almost like punishment for that.
In Paris, Napoleon responded to the crisis with a series of extreme measures. Property taxes doubled, state salaries and pensions suspended, 300,000 new conscripts called up, from a country already exhausted by 20 years of war.
Yeah, like, you know, it's just you think about how many people have died of the French, right? Like, you think of the Revolution, which was a bloodbath on its own, you know, the guillotines and all of that. That's already bad enough. And then the Napoleonic Wars, like, 20 years of just Europe trying to jump France, and France constantly giving so much, you know, for these wars. Like, it is amazing France still even has the power to give so many people to Napoleon. Like, that's amazing. So many French people just died during this time, you know? I don't know. It's amazing, man.
He ordered the release of Pope Pius, under French house arrest for the last 5 years, to try to shore up his support in Italy. He even agreed to release Fernando, the Bourbon King of Spain, to take up his throne in exchange for peace between France and Spain, a condition that Fernando was in no position to honour. But these concessions were too little, far too late.
Yeah.
In January...
Yeah, Europe's at the point, especially with the refusal of the Frankfurt proposals. They're at the point they're done with Napoleon. They're like, we want him gone. We want you out of Europe. They're done. Like, they're just done with Napoleon. And they're not willing to submit. After a while, they're not willing to negotiate. They just want Napoleon away, you know?
January, 2 coalition armies crossed the Rhine into France. Blücher's army of Silesia and Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia. Outnumbered French forces in their path could only fall back. On the 25th of January, Napoleon said farewell to his wife and son at the Tuileries Palace, before leaving for the front. He would never see either of them again. With just 70,000 men, he faced odds of 4-1. Most of his troops were raw conscripts, some without uniforms, many just learning how to hold a musket. But for the first time in years, Napoleon's army was so small that he'd be able to exercise direct command over all its movements. The result would be one of the most audacious and brilliant campaigns in history.
My favorite campaign of Napoleon's, just his most, in my opinion, his most beautiful display of tactical brilliance and skill, showcasing that the man never lost his touch, you know? I love the 6 Days campaign. It is Napoleon at, in my opinion, just performing his best, you know?
Imagine Napoleon waging...
If the enemy are foolish enough to cross the Rhine, I will march to meet them. Then you will see the meaning of the word debacle?
The battle for France would be fought east of Paris, mostly across Champagne, a flat region divided by the rivers Marne and Seine and their tributaries. In late January, fields were dusted with snow and roads quickly turned to mud. Napoleon learned that the coalition armies were widely scattered, with part of Blücher's army near Napoleon's old college at Brienne. The Emperor advanced rapidly, hoping to trap and destroy part of Blücher's army. But after a hard day's fighting that cost both sides 3,000 casualties, Blücher was able to retreat towards Schwarzenberg's army. That evening, Napoleon was nearly skewered by a charging Cossack, saved only by General Gorgo's good shooting.
Dang, man.
As Napoleon tried to work out the enemy's movements,
It is so weird to see Napoleon fighting on French soil. Like, we haven't seen that since, like, what, the Italian campaign video, but, like, or Toulon, I don't remember, but yeah, throughout the entire Napoleonic era, it's almost funny to think, like, the fighting has been away from mainland France for almost all of Napoleon's, like, career, you know? And it's so weird to see him now. Now he's fighting at home. Now finally France is directly threatened, and he's fighting for this defensive war. It's, you know, a bit weird to see. It's a bit like, yeah, it goes to show just how far we've, you know, gone down, and just how finally overwhelmed Napoleon has become.
Heavily reinforced by Schwarzenberg, made a surprise attack at La Rothière. Allied troops advanced through swirling snow to assault the village, defiantly held by young French conscripts. One was so inexperienced that Marshal Marmont had to personally show him how to load his musket during the battle.
Oh, that's hilarious. They're just getting shot. Like, hey, how do I hold this? Like, oh, let me show you. Like, you know, in the middle of a... Oh, man. It's so sad to see the Grand Armée like this, you know? Because at one point it was just the ultimate well-oiled fighting force of all of Europe, and now it's like, yeah, you know, it's finally lost so much, and Napoleon couldn't replace those losses. That it's like, oh, you know, yeah, it's just sad. It's just the armée now. But it's still beyond impressive, mainly because of Napoleon's leadership alone. I think it's the only thing keeping things afloat for the Grand Armée, you know?
By late afternoon, Wreder's Bavarian Corps was falling on Napoleon's flank. Heavily outnumbered, Napoleon had no option but to retreat, having lost 5,000 casualties and 73 guns abandoned in the thick mud. The Allies' frontal attacks meant their losses were greater, but by combining their armies, they defeated Napoleon on French soil for the first time.
Yeah, they're just getting... Oh man, that's so sad, hearing that statement. Yeah, Napoleon is lost on his own turf. But man, like, it goes to show you, Napoleon is making them bleed, and the only thing keeping them up is the fact that they can replace their losses, and Napoleon can't, you know? But yeah, it's just showing Napoleon's, like, still so impressive, and he's making them work for it, you know?
Believing Napoleon would now retreat towards Paris, the Allies decided to advance along two routes to ease pressure on the roads. Blücher would take a northern route along the Marne. Schwarzenberg would follow the Seine. But dividing their armies again would play right into Napoleon's hands.
Divide and conquer, man.
Here's one thing you need to do before buying anything online. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch...
Man, you think they would have learned after a while, like, hey, Napoleon usually likes separating people, or them being separated, you know? I get it for the ease of travel and road and probably supplies and all that, but, like, you think the coalition would have learned after so many years, like, yeah, but then again, they probably figured they've already won. Even Napoleon, despite how great he's performing, has still lost, so, yeah, I could understand there being a little lax about that. The study of it has given me a greater idea of his genius than any other. Even Wellington's putting respect, man. Like, Wellington definitely gave a lot of quotes giving respect about Napoleon. Well, dude, it's like, real recognizes real, man. Great minds.
After 2 days to reorganize, Napoleon continued his retreat to Nogent, where he learned that the Allies had split their armies. Not only that, they were advancing at different speeds. The aggressive Blücher racing ahead, while the more cautious Schwarzenberg lagged behind. Leaving Oudinot and Victor to guard the Seine bridges and delay Schwarzenberg, Napoleon raced north through mud and rain with 30,000 men. The army of Silesia was strung out on the march, oblivious to the danger it was in. First, Napoleon fell on General Ossouffiev's Russian 9th Corps at Champaubert, destroying it, taking its commander and 2,000 men prisoner.
I love seeing this, man. Like I said, it really feels like the last hurrah of Napoleon, but shows you just he has complete control. Probably the first time in a while, huh? Like, he's just in complete control of everything, the movements and all that, and he is performing so great. Like, there's a reason a lot would claim Napoleon is the greatest general in history. Again, that's a very arguable and debatable statement, but I've kind of leaned into that myself. Like, Napoleon is just a beast, man. A beast of, like, warfare.
The next morning, he marched on General Austin Sacken's force near Montmiral. This was a much larger force, with 2 infantry and 1 cavalry corps, and was expecting support from York's Prussian First Corps. But the Prussians were late, and Sacken's troops could not withstand the French onslaught. At this desperate hour, the Emperor's elite Old Guard were no longer held back, but were often thrown into the thick of the fighting. By the end of the day, Napoleon had inflicted another 3,500 casualties, twice his own losses, and the Allies were in rapid retreat. Napoleon had ordered Marshal MacDonald to cut off the enemy's escape by seizing the Marne Bridge at Château Thierry. But York's Prussians got there first. The next day, Napoleon could only batter their rear guard as the enemy fled across the Marne, destroying the bridge behind them. Sending Marshal Mortier to rebuild the bridge and continue the pursuit, Napoleon doubled back to rejoin Marmont, who had been left to keep watch on Blücher. Napoleon attacked at Vauchamp, using General Grouchy's cavalry to outflank Blücher's army, which was soon in headlong retreat. A merciless French pursuit inflicted 6,000 Prussian and Russian casualties. Napoleon lost just 600 men.
Holy crap, dude. Napoleon's putting it... He is putting it all. He's making them work, man. He's always doing great, but something about this, it's like, he's going even above and beyond, man. Like, even when the situation looks like he's lost and all, he is just genius. Genius. Bravo, Napoleon. Bravo.
Napoleon had taken on an enemy army almost twice his size, and beaten it 4 times in just 6 days. Blücher had lost an estimated 15,000 casualties in battle, and another 15,000 in smaller engagements, as stragglers or deserters.
Holy crap. And Blücher, I think, is one of the best leaders of the Napoleonic era, but here Napoleon is just making him almost look amateurish. Obviously he's not an amateur, I'm not saying that, but he's making him look like it, with these numbers, man.
For now, the army of Silesia had been scattered and neutralized. But
dude, yeah, Blücher, man, who I have nothing but respect for, but yeah, he got owned there, to put it nicely, and now Napoleon's moving on the slower troops.
In the south, Marshals Victor and Oudinot had not been able to prevent Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia from crossing the Seine in 3 places. Austrian troops were now just 40 miles from Paris. Leaving Mortier and Marmont to keep watch on Blücher, Napoleon raced south. Schwarzenberg, alarmed by news of Blücher's defeat...
Dude, he is zooming. Like, Napoleon is moving fast. It's like watching the Grand Armée at its peak, like the War of the Third and Fourth Coalition. Like, you see how fast he's moving. He's hauling. He's like running like he's the Flash, jumping to back, and just fighting everyone. Oh my gosh, dude. Beautiful.
And of Napoleon's approach, immediately ordered a retreat. It was too late for Wittgenstein's advance guard, routed at Mormant with 2,000 casualties. Napoleon sent Victor's Second Corps to seize the bridge at Montereau, but was so infuriated by its slow progress that he sacked Victor and gave his corps to General Gérard. The next day, at the Battle of Montereau, the French drove the Allied Württemberg Corps back across the river, with 30% losses. According to some accounts, the Emperor sighted the French cannon himself, as he had at Lodi 18 years before.
Holy crap. This really feels like it, man. It feels like Napoleon. I'm really sad. I know I keep saying this, but this really does feel like the last... This feels like his last blaze of glory, you know? This feels like his last hurrah. And it really is, this campaign. This is like his final performance before the curtains close. I know Waterloo still happens, but he loses that, you know? And it's like, this just feels like, yeah. Like, here, let me show you some of the greatest hits. Let me show you what made me master of Europe. Like, you know? He's just like... This almost is like him showcasing everything. Like his skill, his speed, his willingness to be among his men. It's just like Napoleon's greatest hits. Let me show you everything that made me what I am. Like, you're just seeing it all again before. It's like perfect. It's like you couldn't write TV this good, you know? Like, man. He really was the last great conqueror, wasn't he? Like, the last great leader and conqueror who could do it all. Politics, warfare, like, I don't think there's been anyone like Napoleon or since Napoleon, you know? He is up there with the likes of Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. And, like, yeah, Napoleon was the last one to be, like, given into that rank, into that group, you know? Just, you know, once in a lifetime man.
Napoleon had the Allies on the run. But how long could it last?
Yeah. Recollect what your military position is. If we act with military and political prudence, how can France resist a just peace demanded by 600,000 warriors? Let her, if she dare.
Even as fighting continued, negotiations between France and the coalition reopened at Châtillon-sur-Seine on the 5th of February. The Allied terms were now more severe. A return to France's frontiers of 1791, which meant the additional loss of Belgium, a humiliation that Napoleon refused to accept.
Napoleon, you should have accepted the Frankfurt proposals. that was the best deal they could give you. Now they're gonna, obviously, as you've dragged this on, they're gonna make it harsher. And even then, you probably should accept. Like, oh my gosh.
Instead, he tried to revive the Frankfurt proposals, hoping to play...
Too late, Napoleon. I'm sorry. You're too late there, man. You should have gotten on that boat. I'm sorry.
For time, and to split the coalition, whose war aims varied from Britain's hard line to Austria's more ambiguous position. But this hope was thwarted by British Foreign Secretary Lord Castlereagh. On the 1st of March, he persuaded the Allies to sign the Treaty of Chaumont. In it, Russia, Prussia, Austria and Great Britain agreed to keep 150,000 troops in the field and not to negotiate separately with France, while Britain added the sweetener of a £5 million subsidy to be shared among the Allies. The treaty's secret articles specified common war aims, including the future independence of the German states, Switzerland and Italy, while Spain was to be returned to the Bourbons and Holland to the House of Orange. The four powers even agreed that once they'd defeated Napoleon, they'd form a 20-year defensive alliance to maintain peace in Europe, a sign of their newfound commitment to each other.
Man, Napoleon has literally unified all of Europe, but against him, huh? Dang.
A split in the coalition had been Napoleon's last best hope for a favor.
Yeah, and they're just more united than ever. Yeah, Napoleon, like I said, should have sued for peace, because the longer he delayed it, just the more, like, harsher they got, and the more, like, against Napoleon they became. Like, yeah, it's backfired immensely.
Favorable peace. That was gone. And news from across the country was bleak. French cities were surrendering to the Allies without a fight. Nancy, Dijon and Macon had all fallen. In the south, Wellington defeated Marshal Soult at Orthez, forcing him to fall back on Toulouse. 2 weeks later, as British troops approached the city of Bordeaux, it declared loyalty to France's Bourbon kings. The mayor himself rode out to greet the British, bearing a white cockade, the sign of Bourbon allegiance. Napoleon's hope for a nation in arms to resist the Allies had not materialized.
Yeah, a lot of France was just done with the constant war, man. They didn't have that same fight till the end attitude that, like, frickin' Spain did, or even Napoleon himself. They were just done. And yeah, that's the thing. Napoleon wanted to keep fighting, but his marshals were even like, accept the abdication, Napoleon, please. Just stop. Like, after the thing is, just Napoleon lost all support.
Troops, particularly Cossacks, often robbed French civilians and committed some atrocities. French peasants took revenge when they could, but there was no guerrilla war to mirror what French troops had encountered in Spain or Russia. The chief desire among ordinary French people was for peace, at almost any price.
Dangers crowded upon him, encompassed him, oppressed him from every side. But he sought to escape from them by misrepresenting them to himself. Yeah, Napoleon just couldn't accept the L, man. I don't think he could. It just wasn't in him.
Any talk of Napoleon's defeat in late February was premature. The French Emperor was driving Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia before him, even though it was twice his size. But Schwarzenberg scrambled to safety behind the river Aube. Napoleon knew he had to land another decisive blow soon, so turned his attention back to Blücher. After an aborted attempt to join forces with Schwarzenberg, Blücher had decided to resume his advance on Paris, gathering reinforcements en route, and with only Marmont and Mortier's weak corps to oppose him. Leaving Marshal MacDonald in command in the south, Napoleon set off to intercept Blücher, covering 60 miles in 3 days along terrible roads choked with mud. At Napoleon's approach, Blücher retreated across the Marne, burning the bridges behind him. 24 hours later, they'd been rebuilt by French engineers, and Napoleon was poised to crush Blücher against the Aisne River, because the major crossing point at Soissons was held by a Franco-Polish garrison. But after just a day's fighting, the garrison commander at Soissons tamely surrendered, allowing Blücher to escape. Napoleon continued his pursuit across the Aisne, still hoping to cut off the army of Silesia. But at Craon, he encountered Russian troops in a strong defensive position. The Russians fought stubbornly. The French finally forced the enemy to withdraw, but only at the cost of 6,000 casualties, including many irreplaceable veterans from Napoleon's guard. Napoleon pushed on to Laon. But by now, Blücher had concentrated his forces, 98,000 troops in all, and outnumbered Napoleon 2 to 1. French attacks were repulsed, while Marmont's corps was caught off guard by a late Allied counterattack and routed. Napoleon was lucky to avoid a much heavier defeat. Blücher, usually aggressive to the point of recklessness, was unwell and had been told Napoleon's army was twice as big as it was, leading him to act with unusual caution. Laon was a heavy blow to Napoleon. 6,500 casualties he could not afford. Undaunted, he fell back to Soissons, and after a brief moment to reorganize, he marched on the city of Reims, which had just fallen to Saint-Priest's Russian corps. In a whirlwind assault, Napoleon retook the city. Saint-Priest himself was mortally wounded, his corps routed. Meanwhile, in the south, Schwarzenberg had resumed his offensive as soon as he found out Napoleon had gone north. In heavy fighting, he'd driven Oudinot and MacDonald back from the River Aube. 5 days later, the Allies had recaptured Troyes, as MacDonald retreated behind the River Seine. Now, after 4 days to rest and reorganize his battered army, Napoleon was coming south once more.
Napoleon can't be everywhere at once, and that's the biggest issue. Like, he's doing amazing, but, you know, not to speak ill of MacDonald or Marmont, but they're not performing at the same level of Napoleon, and I think that's kind of the thing. His marshals were defeated, and that was kind of a big point of them telling Napoleon to abdicate, and, you know, them even, like, deciding not to fight anymore because it's like, yeah, they just all couldn't be like Napoleon. They all couldn't hold the line and perform as great as he is right now. And yeah, that's the thing. There's only one Napoleon. Maybe if Davout were there, he'd be up there, like, him and Napoleon would be competing, but I miss Davout. But you know what I mean. Like, yeah, it's just like, at this point, like, yeah, that's kind of the thing. Napoleon can't be everywhere.
Schwarzenberg, emboldened by news of Napoleon's defeat at Laon, decided that this time he would stand and fight. Napoleon advanced on Arcis-sur-Aube. ignoring reports that the enemy was not retreating as he believed, but gathering for battle. As heavy fighting broke out, Napoleon still believed he faced only the enemy rearguard. It was a nasty surprise to discover that he faced the entire might of the army of Bohemia. 28,000 men against 80,000. In desperate fighting, Napoleon personally rallied fleeing troops and exposed himself to enemy fire, having his horse killed under him by an exploding shell.
Goodness.
But the odds were too great. At the end of the second day, Napoleon was forced to order the retreat.
Mobile games are going big.
I saw the glorious death dispute. I saw glorious death disputing, foot by foot, the soil of the country. The balls flew around me, my clothes were pierced, but none reached me. A glorious death, huh?
Napoleon believed his army was now too weak to take on the Allies directly, so he decided to change strategy. He would march into the rear of the Allied armies, join up with some of his isolated garrisons, and cut the enemy's lines of communication, forcing them to abandon their advance on Paris. But the Allies, until now always one step behind Napoleon, had just received crucial information. Talleyrand, the most brilliant French diplomat of the age, and the most slippery. He'd served France's monarchy, the Revolution, then Napoleon, until in 1807 he fell out irrevocably with the Emperor over foreign policy. He now believed that Napoleon was dragging France into ruin, and worked behind the scenes to ensure his downfall. From Paris, he wrote to the Russian Emperor Alexander at Allied headquarters, informing him that in the capital, support for Napoleon was crumbling, and the city's defences had been completely neglected. He urged the Allies to march immediately on Paris, without allowing Napoleon to distract them. Talleyrand's information was confirmed when the Allies intercepted a report from Napoleon's chief of police, General Savary, meant for the Emperor. The treasury, arsenals and powder stores are empty. We are completely at the end of our resources. The population is discouraged and discontented, wishing peace at any price.
And they welcomed him. They welcomed the coalition with open arms, Paris.
As Napoleon advanced on Saint-Dizier, the Allies sent General Witzengerode and 10,000 cavalry to harass his army and to screen their own movements. Then began their march on Paris. At Fère-Champenoise, they collided with Marmont and Mortier's corps, advancing to join Napoleon. An entire National Guard division, 5,000 men, was virtually wiped out as the marshals suffered a crushing defeat. Napoleon feared that the fall of Paris would be a fatal blow to his regime. His political authority and ability to wage war might not recover.
Yeah.
So when he received news of the Allies' movements, he tore up his plans and ordered a forced march back to Paris, intending to lead its defense in person. Napoleon's wife and son were evacuated from the capital, along with most of his ministers. His brother, Joseph, the ex-king of Spain, was in charge of the city's defenses, but had done little. Paris was awash with rumors of treachery and defeat. Marmont and Mortier were able to reach Paris before the Allies, adding their troops to the garrison. It now totaled 37,000 men, including some hardened veterans of the Guard, but many more young conscripts, while a third were part-time soldiers of the National Guard. The Allies had 120,000 seasoned troops outside the city, and given the urgency of taking Paris before Napoleon could intervene, their elite guards and grenadier divisions would lead the way. On the 30th of March, they began their assault from the north. Heavy fighting raged throughout the day. The city's defenders fought bravely, inflicting several thousand casualties on the advancing enemy. But defeat was inevitable. That night, to save Paris from destruction, Marshal Marmont agreed to surrender the city, on condition the garrison was permitted to leave with its weapons. At the Hôtel des Invalides, the 71-year-old Marshal Serrurier oversaw the burning of 1,400 flags and standards captured from France's enemies, as well as Frederick the Great's sword and sash, so they would not fall into Allied hands. Napoleon was just 15 miles from Paris when he was informed of the city's surrender. He sat with his head in his hands for 15 minutes.
Yeah, he's done, man. That's so... Man, I get it, though. Like, yeah, either that or Paris becomes completely destroyed. I don't even, like, hate, you know, the marshals for doing that, because it's like, yeah, like, it's either that or we all die, Paris is just blown to smithereens, you know? Yeah, but it's just sad, because, like, that's it. Napoleon's done, you know? We do not intend to expose Paris to the fate of Moscow. Yeah, Marshal MacDonald's completely right there. Like, Napoleon, I know he wants to fight to the bitter end and then some, but he doesn't, not everyone, hardly, no one else seems to be on the same idea or opinion as Napoleon there.
On the 31st of March 1814, France's enemies marched into Paris for the first time since the 100 Years' War. Parisian crowds cheered the three Allied monarchs, bringers of peace. Everyone in Paris was suddenly a royalist once more. Above all, they cheered for Emperor Alexander of Russia, now hailed as Europe's saviour. Don Cossacks bivouacked on the Champs-Élysées. Allied troops generally behaved well. "35 miles away, Napoleon was at Fontainebleau with 36,000 men, all of them hungry and exhausted after their 100-mile forced march. Nevertheless, Napoleon began planning an immediate advance on Paris. But for the first time...
That's insane. The man was really about to fight them all there. But everyone talked him out of it. Like, no, we're not doing that, Napoleon. We're done with this. Even his marshals were like, we can't do it, Napoleon. I'm sorry. Like, you know. The madman wanted to... Imagine Napoleon did get his way. Like, what the heck, man? Like, he was really ready to fight them all at Paris, man. Napoleon has the guts, man. He just didn't have the support.
He faced unanimous opposition from his ministers and marshals, including Ney, MacDonald, Oudinot, and Berthier. They reminded him of his oath to act for the good of France. He accused them of disloyalty, acting only to save themselves. They told him the war was lost, and he must abdicate in favour of his son if possible. On the 4th of April, Marshal Marmont surrendered his entire corps to the coalition, which was marched over to the enemy lines against the wishes of many of its officers and men. This was a devastating blow to Napoleon, and encouraged the Allies to reject his offer of a conditional abdication in favour of his son. 2 days later, he abdicated without conditions. The Allied powers, having proclaimed that the Emperor Napoleon is the only obstacle to the re-establishment of peace in Europe, the Emperor Napoleon, faithful to his oath, declares that he renounces for himself and his heirs the thrones of France and Italy, and that there is no personal sacrifice, including his life, that he is not ready to make in the interests of France.
I just know that reading that and having to sign that probably broke Napoleon. Like, Napoleon, who wouldn't accept the best peace terms and conditions, having to do that probably required him to swallow every ounce of pride that he had left in him. Man, that's soul crushing.
Napoleon's abdication was formalized by the Treaty of Fontainebleau, by which he was allowed to keep the title of emperor, become sovereign of the small island of Elba, and retain a bodyguard of 400 men. News came too late to prevent Wellington's attack on Toulouse, leading to a costly and pointless battle, with more than 7,000 casualties. The night after his abdication, Napoleon tried to commit suicide, using the poison that had been made for him in Russia, in case of capture.
Yeah, he was, like I said, that probably broke him, man. Like, the most despair probably a human could experience, probably Napoleon experienced, you know? And yeah, man, this is awful. He literally lost everything. He has, like I said, probably should have accepted those Frankfurt proposals. I'm so sorry I keep bringing it up. I really think he should have. Like, he literally is left with nothing, you know? At least he has Elba, though. He rules Elba pretty well, but yeah, compared to France, yeah. And the longer he delayed and kept this going, notice how the Allies became even more and more, like, against Napoleon the longer he dragged this all out. Like, at first, pretty favorable, you know, France to its borders, here, keeps them at the Rhine. And then it's like, no, we're gonna make the terms harsher. And then it became, they made a bunch of, and then it's like, hey, let's all unify for 20 years to make sure Napoleon doesn't ever pose a threat. And then now it became, you and your heirs, no one with the name Bonaparte. Like, it just kept getting worse. Like, yeah, Napoleon should have just taken the L right away. I know that's not Napoleon, but that's the last chance he had, man. Now he literally lost. He was too stubborn and prideful for his own good, I think, in that regard. You know?
But it had lost its potency, and he survived. 2 weeks later, Napoleon bade farewell to his old guard at Fontainebleau Palace, and began his journey into exile.
I have been wrong maybe in my plans. I have done harm in war, but it is all like a dream.
The Napoleonic Wars, which had raged on land and sea for 11 years, seemed finally at an end. The death toll is unknown, but historians estimate that 2 to 3 million lives were lost across Europe. Most soldiers died not in battle, but from disease. Many thousands were left maimed and disfigured. For most of this period, Napoleon was master of Europe, imposing treaties on humbled enemies redrawing frontiers, overthrowing old regimes, and making new kings. He was the last figure in history to combine total political power with frontline military genius.
He really was, huh? The last great of the likes of like Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. He really was the last one, man. I don't think there'll ever be one like him again, you know?
In the mold of Alexander and Caesar.
We're on the same wavelength, aren't we, Epic History TV?
Seemed Napoleon's reign was to end in abject military defeat. However, exile on Elba did not prove to Napoleon's taste. In less than 10 months, he would return to France to fight one last great campaign to reclaim his throne.
Unfortunately, he loses Waterloo, but yeah, guys, we're about to reach the end of this series next time with his, funnily enough, one of his earliest videos of Waterloo. And that really did feel like Napoleon's last hurrah. That was his last flame of brilliance before it was snuffed out. And it's sad, but, you know. And that's sad. We've literally witnessed the last of Napoleon's, like, great victories. And, well, we'll finish it all off on Waterloo, my friends. I will see you all in the Battle of Waterloo. Bye, everyone.